All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is Jeff from Kentucky. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, not a whole lot, man. I'm glad to have you on the show tonight. I've been excited to talk to you. I know we've tried to do this a couple of times and had to reschedule, so I appreciate you being I appreciate you adjusting your schedule and rescheduling this. So let's get right into it, man. Let's talk about what got you interested in Bigfoot and the paranormal and the subject in general, and just sort of give the audience a little bit of your background and tell us what got you on this path, man.
Well, I've always been interested in weird things, the paranormal, ghost, UFOs, Bigfoot, cryptids. I mean, a little bit of everything. I guess ever since I could read a book, I was always the kid in school that was, checking out the weird books. I don't know how many times I read what my library had, but they didn't have a lot back then. But that's kind of headed me down my path. And then, of course, you had the old TV series that would sometimes touch on weird things like unsolved mysteries and things like that. So, once I got of age to actually go out and search for this stuff, that's kind of what I've done. So I've been doing this stuff probably, around 25 years now, I guess.
Well, I know you've got a background in law enforcement, so from one former police officer to a current police officer, I appreciate your service, man. And I think we need more people like that in this kind of business because we have so many people out there. I've had so many conversations recently with people I've had on the show about just the shenanigans that are going on in the Bigfoot community in particular, and with research and where we are on the evidence. Let me ask you this. It was some of those things that got you interested in the subject, but did you have experiences as a child that made you interested? I know that's kind of when it started for me. So did you have anything that happened in your childhood that sort of
Strangely enough, I didn't have my first paranormal experience till I was like 15, and that was with a ghost. And then I didn't have my actual first cryptid experience, I would say, until I actually started going out there in the field and things like that. I mean, I've had tons of ghost stuff, over the years, just investigating things. But I think once you get that little taste of strangeness, where you're like, okay, I've read about this stuff, I've seen this stuff, but now I've experienced it, and there's no other explanation for whatever that is. I want to go. I'm hungry now, and that's kind of what you get into. And when I got into law enforcement, I've been doing that for about 19 years now. You learn a very very formalized way to investigate and collect evidence and photograph things and do all that stuff. I'm at the county level, so it's you really use those tools and you start to use that investigative mind in some of your cryptid and paranormal investigations after that.
well, let's talk a little bit about your early experiences. That's kind of when it started for me, was around 12, 13, 14 years old. I was having some ghost experiences in this haunted house that I was living in. Take us back and sort of tell us what was going on with that, and then walk us into some of the investigations you've done since then.
So I was 15, and my cousin asked me if I wanted to go with him to work on this haunted house. So this haunted house was being put on by a local community group, and he was helping build and work the haunted house. And it was in this old hotel in town where I live. And I said, "Yeah, that'd be cool." So I went with him, and we worked throughout the day, explored the old place. It's just a huge old hotel. And then that evening, there was only about three of us left in the building, and we forgot to lock one of the rooms where we kept some equipment and things. So we said, okay, we got to go back up and do it. It was almost dark. And when we were coming out of that room after we had locked it, we all stopped and we started to hear these footsteps coming up the staircase that was right in front of us. And it was those old style hard soled shoes you could hear walking, but it stopped right in the middle of the stairs. And then there was nothing else. So we said, okay, whoever it is, they heard us, they stopped. So now we got them. Went over to the stairs, nothing there. There was still dust on the stairs. And so after that point, I was like, what was that? I'd heard all these stories. You hear about the Sally house back in the day on like shows like sightings and things. But until that point, I was like, okay, what was that? So then that really put me on the path to start looking. And then when I could drive a car and all that kind of stuff, I just continued on myself. I've investigated some of the craziest places you could ever imagine. I'm one of the producers of the Nick Groff tour with Lee and Jennifer Kirkland, and we do public investigative tours with Nick, from Ghost Adventures. And we've been to some of the craziest places you could ever imagine. I've experienced some of the wildest apparitions and vocalizations and things like that through that. And whenever you see these apparitions, I will say this: I've never seen two that are the same, and I've seen probably about 6 to 7 at this stage of my life. But no two are the same. They all act differently. They all look differently. So it's really weird. But you know, um, I think when people come up with the mindset of there's nothing out there, that none of this exists, they're closed off from that point forward. And now we're starting to get the government even to admit that aliens or UFOs or something there. So, you can't close your mind to that kind of stuff. There's definitely something there.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I've brought it up a couple of times over the last few days. I had a conversation with Lon Strickler. I interviewed him recently for an upcoming episode of the show, and Lon and I talked about that. It's like the pareidolia in Bigfoot,
Yeah,
for example, right? People send me pictures and videos and things all the time and say, "Hey, I captured this. This is a Bigfoot," and I don't see anything. And
yeah,
there's one of two things, right? It's either it's
yeah,
not there and they're just sort of making it up, or it is pareidolia, or there's something there that I'm not open to seeing. And that's one of the things that Lon and I had a conversation about pretty in depth was once you open yourself up to this, you start seeing more and experiencing more. I've experienced that in my life. I've had a couple
yeah,
of experiences before I started doing the two podcasts that are specific to Bigfoot and the paranormal. But it seems after I started the podcast and I sort of opened my mind to different things and had so many conversations with different people, I've started to experience things that I didn't experience before. And I have to stop and ask myself every day, like, is what I'm hearing, is that really what I'm hearing? Is that really what I'm seeing? But I think that's a good point. I think once you open yourself up and allow yourself to be okay with experiencing that or saying that there may be more to this world than we really know, then you start seeing and experiencing those things. And that's one of the things that I've seen on the show with talking to people with multiple experiences. People who have ghost experiences, people who have had cryptid experiences, people who have seen UFOs and then had alien abduction encounters. And I've said it more than once, and people get on to me for saying it sometimes, but I'm like, either these people are batshit crazy or they're
right.
having these experiences. There's
Well,
there's no
here
middle in
I'll
between.
tell you, there's a point that you know that you hear a lot, especially in the Bigfoot world. And they said that even if one of these sightings is real, well, then there's something to it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, all of these eyewitnesses can't just be making this up. And I've talked to a lot of eyewitnesses and doing the investigations that I've done and the work that I've done. And being a law enforcement officer, you learn how to read people, especially, in my line of work, which is largely correctional based. But you learn to read people because that could be, the difference between you going home at the end of the day or not. And you learn to read their actions and their body language, and you can pretty much figure out if somebody's full of it or not. And some of these people have no reason in the world to make these stories up. They're not looking for fame. They're not looking for fortune. They're not looking for anything out of it. And if they hadn't told you the story, nobody would have ever known. So those stories are the ones that I love, and like you said before, you can't just really cut it down the middle and say it is or ain't, because there's stuff out there that's even weirder than a high hairy bipedal creature walking through the woods. There's a lot of weird things going on in the woods that I've experienced, and I'm sure others have too, that you can't just write off and say, okay, I don't know what that was, but may not want to find out. I've heard chanting in the woods, and you'll see that on some of the footage I've got out there, like chanting, like just rhythmic chanting in the woods, and there's no people around. It's just lights in the woods. I mean, just I've heard what sound like a jet with its afterburner on, right in the woods, probably 5 foot away from me. There's nothing around. So I mean, it's stuff gets weird out there sometimes.
I definitely want to move into the woods, but before we move off the paranormal thing and the ghost thing, let's talk
Yeah.
about some of the places that you've gotten to travel to and investigate. And what are some of, just do like the top two or three places that you've been and
Like
experiences.
favorites. I love Penhurst, in Pennsylvania. That's really cool. It's a place that's so unexplored because of the conditions of some of the buildings, but it is so active up there because of the treatment and things that took place there back in the day. I love Ashmore Estates in Illinois. That's a great place. Um, let's see here. Some of my other favorites that would just really top it off. Um, I've worked extensively with like Perryville Battlefield in Perryville, Kentucky. Um, some of those places are just near and dear to my heart because when people give you unlimited access to a place, then you can really kind of dig in and start to investigate. Also, like Missouri State Pen, that's a really active location. That place was just off the chains, had so much violence when it was open. So yeah, there's several out there. Here's what I encourage people to do is I encourage people to find a location that will give them access where they can have access pretty much anytime they'd like, and they need to investigate that place nonstop. I've had probably 5 or 6 of those places because I do a ghost tour here in my town, and they give me a key and they're like, "Hey, just investigate it, check it out, whatever you want to do. It's free to roam." And Perryville gave us that access as well. And in doing that, you learn so much about what's there. And you can really kind of pin it down to, okay, that's strange because that happens regularly. So I definitely encourage people, if you can find a place where you can go to quite frequently, you will learn so much more about the paranormal. And I think that's what cheats us sometimes with the paranormal is people don't do that. They may go to a place for 5 or 6 hours overnight, but that's it. They don't go back anymore. So then they say, "Oh, well, that place ain't very active." Well, no, it wasn't active when you were there. So I mean, without having a consistent spot to investigate, man, that really lets you cut your teeth as an investigator.
So those were your top places. What's been your top experiences, whether it was a good experience or a scary experience or a bad experience that you've had in some of those
you know,
places?
one of my most scariest experiences was not at any of those, and it's when I think I probably had my first experience with a demonic entity, and that was in a small duplex close to where I'm located, where a lady had contacted us because they were having this activity take place, and we were like, okay, it's probably going to be nothing. So me and another investigator went in, and we investigated the place and we heard growls and there was poltergeist activity and there was nobody there. So, I mean, it wasn't like the homeowner was strings and things trying to make this stuff happen. So, that was the first case where I was like, I'm not going back. I referred them to the church, and went from there because we found some really sketchy things. When you're looking around the places, you're like, okay, these people have welcomed whatever this is in. So that's probably the scariest thing that's happened to me. I always tell people, what's the scariest place? What's the scariest thing that's happened? I'm like, well, I'm not really afraid of this stuff. You may jump when you're there, but if I'm actively seeking this, I can't really be afraid of it. So, John Zaffis was one that gave that advice. He's like, you can't really be scared of it if you're looking for it. It's nice to be fearful, but you don't need to be afraid. And so I always tell folks, it's not about being scared. It's about, what's the most, prevalent piece of evidence that I can capture. And, some of these apparitions, there's no way in the world you can write them off. I mean, I've seen at Penhurst, for example, I seen a person standing behind us. It was probably to my right, over my shoulder, and I was like, "Okay, there's a person, standing there." There was a group of us in this area, and then this person rapidly moved off like you'd hit the fast forward button, and they were pale white, and I was like, "Okay, that's strange." And there was nothing else it could be. There's no human living person that could move that fast. So, I mean, when you experience stuff like that, it's hard to explain, and I don't know. It's mind blowing, really. It makes you question everything else.
I definitely question everything now. So
Everything. You can't not question things. You have to.
So let's talk a little bit about the evidence. I've said it before on the show. It's very difficult, in my opinion, to capture legitimate evidence that can be scientifically scrutinized and proven when it comes to, say, paranormal stuff, right? We got EVPs. I've
Right.
captured an EVP. I've talked about that on the show before. Only time it ever happened. It was very quick. It was very, in my opinion, there was no doubting what the EVP said. You know, I'm provoking. I'm
Right.
provoking. I say I'm not scared. I play back the tape on my iPhone. It says you should be clear as
Right.
day. Right? Scared the shit out of me. So, but that's the only time it's ever happened. It's never happened to me before that I know of. So let me ask you, as an investigator, A, you go out and I know the opportunity that you have to go into these people's homes that are experiencing things like the lady who was having this demonic thing going on in her duplex. I know for, at least I don't want to put words in your mouth. I would assume for you, it's about helping people. But there's got to be that
Yeah.
little nagging part of you that always wants to catch evidence. So, what is your approach as an investigator to capturing that evidence? What do you take with you as far as equipment? What do you use to try to capture that evidence? And what is the best evidence that you feel that you've either seen or you've personally captured when it comes to the paranormal?
I'll say this: my best evidence has been captured when I was not there. Meaning, a lot of times what I would do, and I started doing this years ago for the ghost tour I do. I was like, okay, I have unprecedented access to some of these places, so I would take a regular old Sony recorder and long record for like 48 hours. Then I would go back and I would drop it in like a program like Audacity where you could see the waves, and then I would go and I would analyze that audio. And I found that some of these places reacted better when nobody was there than when you were there trying to communicate with it. Now, that's not the case with everything. I've also found that sometimes we bombard these places with too much equipment. And I found that out because, and this is weird, but one of the locations I was working with, there was a big static storm coming through, big electrical storm. So I was like, okay, I'm going to drop this recorder in there for a couple of days. When I got the recorder back, was listening to it, everything was locked. Nobody was in there. Very controlled. Nothing, nothing, nothing. You'd hear a bang here, a bang there. But then I've got this little snippet of recording where I was like, there's no way in the world this person did not get into the building. And what it is it's a lady, and you hear her speech, and it's very fast. So I was like, okay, that's strange. So I slowed it down slightly, and she says, I don't understand what that thing is. Can you tell me? And another lady says, you go and you talk into it. It's exactly what they said on the recorder. Went back, nobody had gotten in. You hear nobody else but me. And that started making me think, in that circumstance, whatever was there could see into our world. There's all these theories out there that they can't see our world, that they see it the way that it was when they were living. This showed that in the conditions that were there, that they could see into our world. So from that point forward, I stopped taking large amounts of equipment into a location for the first time. Now, if it's a very known location, say like Waverly Hills or something of that nature, they've been investigated to death. I feel comfortable taking things in. Still don't mean it's going to help you get things. So usually when I start working with a new location, I'll take a recorder, I'll take just maybe like a camera and a flashlight, and that's pretty much it. And I've started to make the circumstance where if it is a case I'm actually working, they must give me unprecedented access to the place where I can lock this recorder in there for at least a day with nobody there, because I want to see how the building reacts when nobody is around. And that's when some stuff really starts to happen, strangely enough.
Yeah, one of the most eerie sounds that I've ever heard recorded in a place that people would recognize was the Sally House, and it was from the Astonishing Legends podcast.
Right.
And they went in and did their thing there, and they left this recorder going in this room where there was nobody at. They were all downstairs, and there's something literally, it sounds like it's screaming into the microphone,
Yep.
and it's really eerie. But there was
Yeah,
nobody in
I've
the room.
gotten, I'll tell you something else I've gotten by doing that is I've gotten another recording with it's a lady screaming. I play all these on my ghost tour. I don't have them like out there in the public because everybody likes to pick evidence apart. But this one, when I first heard it, I was like, okay, it must be a car's brakes or something. Well, then when you listen to it, you hear the gasp in her breath when she's screaming. Um, there was another circumstance where I used one of these recorders, left it, and came back, and you literally hear footsteps. You hear doors opening and shutting. You hear a desk chair rolling across the floor when nobody was there. So I mean, some of these locations, if people would do more of that in a controlled manner, I think that you would get a lot of crazy stuff because there's no human element there.
Yeah, that's a good point, man. I went out to Fort Defiance. We're here in North Carolina. We went just out exploring over the weekend, and we went over to this place called Fort Defiance in Happy Valley, about 15 minutes from our house. And this place has been around since the 1780s. And it's got so much history and so many different things went on there. And so many people passed away and came and went. And I would love to go in there. I spend a lot of time talking to the curators, and it's sort of a volunteer thing. You know, I think
Right.
the county owns the place now, and I don't know what it would be like to
Maybe
try
you
to.
need to volunteer.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing, right? You and I are thinking alike. Because I
Yeah.
thought I would love to get in there and be able to just leave a recorder in that place for 24 hours when they're
Yeah,
closed.
it's wild because I'll tell you another situation. Perryville battlefield. It was the bloodiest battle in Kentucky and one of the most brutal battles of the Civil War period because it was a short amount of time. Thousands died and were injured in that short amount of time. So they call it one of the most brutal. So um, I basically wrote a letter, before email to the director in the state, and they were like, "Yeah, come meet with us." So I went and talked to him, and I was the first one to officially get permission to investigate the battlefield. And from that point forward, I worked with them for years until they, changed management or whatever. But I've heard full conversations take place in the middle of the night with nobody there. I've heard more cannon fire than you could ever believe, to the point where when I would be there with people that maybe had not been there so much, they would be like, "Oh, did you hear that?" I'd be like, "It happens all the time." And yeah, it's a cannon. I mean, there's no other sound. If you've ever heard a cannon, you know what a cannon sounds like. So I mean, it's strange to explain that kind of stuff because with a battlefield, you don't have walls, you don't have a foundation. So what keeps it there? That's what makes it sometimes hard to understand. Is with a building, I get it sometimes with the stone tape theory of the building recording or absorbing this energy and playing it back when it's properly or whatever. But a battlefield, I mean, it's open air, you know. But it's just when you think you have it mildly figured out, if something will happen that will show you that you have no idea what's going
That sounds like my life on repeat, man.
on.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the weird things that have happened to you in the woods because that's more up
Okay.
my alley, right? I've had a lot of things that have happened to me in the woods here in our on our property in North Carolina, and even when I was a kid and growing up in North Georgia. And I've had some friends who've had some really creepy things going on outside of Bigfoot and even what would be considered other cryptids. So, talk
Right.
about some of the things that you've experienced that have been sort of weird in the woods.
Oh, honestly, the weirdest thing that has really kind of blew my mind was the chanting. Um, it sounded like a group of people that were chanting in the woods. I don't really want to say like a ritualistic type thing, but it was chanting. It was rhythmic. There was a rhythm to it. I've heard that twice in the same area when nobody's there. I mean, there's no one there. You know that no one's there. Um, I mean, that was kind of like, what am I dealing with now? Kind of situation where you're like, maybe what I'm dealing with is not solely Bigfoot. Maybe it's something else. Um, you know, on my YouTube channel, I put this stuff out there where people can see it and comment on it because that's where I pretty much lodge my Bigfoot research. And people are like, "Well, what if it was a skinwalker?" And I'm like, "Well, let's not go down that path. I'd rather it not be that." It's not that I don't believe that. I'd just rather not deal with that. But you know, that right there kind of blows my mind at times. Is I've had some weird things in that particular area where, we've gotten disoriented at night, and there's no reason in the world you should be disoriented because I know that place like the back of my hand. So, That's strange. That's really strange. You see and hear that chanting is something that just blew my mind, and it still blows my mind. And I've heard it at least twice now, and I can't figure out what that is. That's
Well, you
probably the
mentioned
weirdest thing.
well, you mentioned earlier that you'd also seen lights and orbs and things like that in the
Yep.
woods as
Blue
well.
lights. I've seen little blue lights. I've seen other lights um, in the woods. I've seen eye shine and things that yeah, it just shouldn't be there. I've been growled at many times, at least 3 times. Um, Vocalizations. I've never actually seen what people would say is a Bigfoot. I've not seen one that I would say. I think I've been close to something of that size and that I can't explain because in Kentucky you don't have those large animals like a bear. I mean, they are randomly roaming around, but they're not commonly around. And plus, black bear usually are very skittish of people. So, I think I've been very, very close, within probably 100 yards to 50 yards of one, and it let me know that it was there, and that was very unsettling. But I think that you have to also respect their area. So whenever I knew it was there, I didn't go, "Oh, I'm gonna walk on over and see it." No, I'd rather not, go missing and without an explanation. So in that circumstance, I respect their area, I respect their land. And I think that sometimes helps people as well if you show respect. So I mean, the woods are a weird place. I'll tell you right now, the woods are a lot weirder than most haunted locations. Just from my experience.
Mine too, man. And so many people I've talked to have had experiences. My buddy Jonathan Odom, I bring him up quite often on the show. Jonathan's had some weird experiences in the woods while he's out big fun. I mean, he's a big time Bigfooter and he's out in the woods as much as possible. And he's had some weird experiences with little people that look like puckwudgies that have ran across him on the path
Yeah,
that he's crossing and jump over the side of the like they're trying to pull him over the side of this embankment. Just
right.
weird stuff. And these wood, these lights that are seen in the woods. We've had weird experiences here with our woods will light up at 3 o'clock in the morning like there's a helicopter with a searchlight over us and there's nobody or nothing there. It's just
I'll tell
weird.
you, I've seen in the woods, and it's on video. What looked like car headlights moving through the woods, but there's no road. There's no road there. It was a river, so there's no way that a car is going to turn around there. I mean, there's no car there. There's no road to get there, but it looks like car headlights in the woods, which is just mind blowing to me. Why would you see these car headlights in the woods when there's nothing there? I don't know that if it would be like I don't know. That's what's hard to explain is you can sit here and you can throw theories out all day long, but it does not mean that you're right or wrong. But the lights in the woods are weird, and I've talked to Bobo and to Cliff about those kind of things, and they've mentioned them too, and they talk about like they've seen orbs in the woods, and sometimes orbs in the woods or these orbs of lights are sometimes associated with Bigfoot sightings, but we can't explain why. Why is it associated with them? I think that's where we get to where we can't explain that.
And that's one of the things I've tried to do on my show is not exclude anything. But, I used to think when I'd hear those stories that it was just a separate experience, right? Somebody's having a Bigfoot encounter on their property and they're also seeing these strange lights and UFOs and things like that. It's mutually exclusive. It just happens to be this coincidence, or they're just batshit crazy and they're making everything up. So, but if they're having these experiences, there may be something more to it. And the more that I've talked to people about the connections or the possible connections, the more I start drawing towards the fact that it may be in some way connected. What do you think about that? I mean, what do you think that there could be a possible connection? And
Here, here's what that man, it's hard because I try to stay a flesh and blood creature guy. I try to stay on. It has to be a flesh and blood creature. I don't try to go down that interdimensional being, UFO, alien connection, paranormal, Bigfoot, ghostly connection. Uh, you know, uh, But once you're out there and you're out there to the point where you're like, maybe that's not Bigfoot that you're experiencing. Maybe it's all getting grouped together, but maybe it's another being. That's what I kind of think. I think Bigfoot is its own deal, but also I think some of this stuff that's paranormal may not be paranormal if we ever were to make a discovery. You know, like for example, the platypus. Yeah, if you explained that to somebody before they discovered it, they'll be like, "Well, it don't exist. There ain't no way that exists. That can't exist." Maybe there isn't that logical explanation for some of this stuff, and maybe it is a part of their being. But I almost think it has to be separated into two different categories. And then in that situation, it might be that it's something else because you got to think the Native American history in our areas, your area and Kentucky, is very rich. And they always talk about a lot of these beings and folklore and things like that. And you got to put a little bit of weight into that because they believe that because there's a little bit of grain of truth to every legend, I think. So, we can't just write that off. And I think if you write that off, then you're again closing your mind. And then when you close your mind, are you really even being an investigator?
I tend to agree with you, man, and especially with Bigfoot. That's been my bane of existence here recently, and just this bone of contention with me. And I've been so irritated and cantankerous with people on
Yeah.
the show recently because I am so wanting to get some answers when it comes to this subject. And it seems the more people I talk to, the more questions I have versus the answers that I was seeking because nobody knows anything and everybody starts developing these theories. And then you get people who are supposed to be experts in the field. And I don't believe that for a second. I don't think there's an expert that will ever be when it comes to Bigfoot unless they're discovered and then somebody spends 20 years, actually documenting the species like a Jane Goodall type of character. But as it stands now, everybody is just theorizing. I theorize behind the microphone on this show every single week, week after week. And the people that I have on the show, some of them do the same thing. But nobody really knows anything. But
No.
I still like to ask the questions because there's a lot of people who know a lot more than I do. And I'm trying to learn and answer these questions for myself. And I talked to people like Peter Byrne I had on the show recently, and I disagree with a lot of what he said because I believe that these things are in areas throughout the country that he doesn't believe.
Right.
And he's been studying it for 60 years. So who am I to disagree with him? I just do. It's
I
just my
will say
personal opinion.
this. And this is one thing that people ask all the time. Well, there's Bigfoot in Kentucky. I'm like, have you ever been to Kentucky? And a lot of them are like, no. I'm like, okay. Have you ever seen a forest in Kentucky? And they're like, no. I'm like, well, they're like jungles. So it could literally be within 20 feet of you and you'd never see it. So, I mean, I think a lot of these people are armchair researchers, that like to throw out these daggers at everybody else. But until you're in the field, you can't really become an expert of anything without being in the field. And then, are you really an expert of anything? Period. I mean, even an expert of anything at all, because they constantly make new discoveries. So, I mean, yes, there are very respected people in the Bigfoot world, and I respect a ton of them, like, Dr. Meldrum and Peter Byrne and guys like that, because they've put in the work and they've put in the work over the years. Don't mean you have to agree with everything they say, but they're good to bounce ideas off of or to get things from, and maybe you can use that in your own research. But I think where people get lost is they like to get on one path and stay with one person, and everything else everybody else says or finds, it's nothing. And I think that they start to discount the historical data that's out there. I think they discount other folks. For example, the NAWAC, the North American Wood Ape Conservancy, they're doing some amazing research, some amazing research. And I've talked to, Matt Pruitt in length about stuff. They're doing amazing research, but a lot of times people are like, well, I don't like those guys because they're pro kill. They want to take a specimen. They have a go, and that go is discovery and protection. And they know in order to do that, they have to have some type of body or some part of a body. So that's area of expertise. It's what they're doing. So how can you discount those people? I'm not even on pro kill, no kill, whatever. I'm in the middle. I'm like, let's figure this out. Let's not throw all these different daggers back and forth, because then we're going to get lost in the mix of, you know, whose balls are bigger than the other guys, and then we're going to lose track of what we're really here for. And I think that there's not a whole lot of networking that goes on in some circumstances, and that drives me nuts.
Yeah, I agree, man. And that's why I try to reach out to as many people and have as many people in my Rolodex as I possibly can. I had Russ, um, shit, I've already forgot his name. He's going to kill me. I'll have to edit that out.
Is it
uh,
Russ Jones?
yes, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ. He called me today. So I just had a conversation with Dr. Russ Jones a couple of days ago, and we had some of these very similar, you know, discussions. I don't
And I know
necessarily,
you've had Tom Shea on your show.
yes, I've had Tom Shea
I've
on the
worked
show.
with Tom very closely. Now, here's the thing that I will say about this: Tom is not very well spoken, but I'm telling you right now, he has so much data. He has more data than anyone else I've ever met, and that right there is there's a reason that Cliff goes to him so much. There's a reason that Cliff talks to him so much, and the reason is because he is meticulous about the data he collects when he casts these footprints. Me and Tom talk all the time about stuff that he's working on and stuff that he's doing. I mean, just I've been to his house and seen the castings that he has. It's insane the amount of castings he has, but the reason he has them is because he follows his data. He looks for the patterns and he keeps going to these patterns and research areas that he works with consistently. That's the key is consistency. You can't go to a place one time and think you're going to find something.
Yeah, I tried to paint that picture when I had Tom on the show because it was like pulling teeth to get him to talk about anything that
Yeah.
he'd done because he's such a humble guy. And I tried to paint that picture and edit the show as best I could to tag and put everything together so people could follow along and understand that this guy is the real boots on the
Oh, he's the
ground
real
dude.
deal. 100% the real deal. I went out with Tom several times and we talk consistently. And I'm telling you, the data that he collects, he's taught me so much about recording data and using that for your future circumstances. And now he's starting to really come around with it. And he's starting to come around from the point of, I think this same creature is moving in this pattern around this area. And this is the mile range that it's going in. Some really cool stuff. And another thing that me and Tom have talked about extensively is we think, and there's probably others throughout the country that think the same thing. We think there's something with the power line cuts that they travel. We think it could be something where a lot of animals use electromagnetic fields. They use these things to as more of a GPS to get them back where they need to be. I think that there's something to that, and I think we need to start really opening our eyes to that. And that might be the key to finding habituation sites is these power line cuts. But that just shows right there, just that little piece of data that he's seen has helped to kind of take the fog out of the mystery, and I think people get so clouded by everybody's opinions, or they get so clouded with trying to be notorious or famous or, some great person within the field. Just do the work. That's it. Do the work. It don't matter if you're ever noticed, but if you do the work and you make a little bit of a discovery or you help somebody else out somewhere else, that's what's important. I have no desire to be a television star. I have no desire to be famous. My YouTube channel is to document what I'm doing. So I put my documentation there for everybody to see and everybody to comment. That's what's important to me is information sharing, and being former law enforcement, you know how important that is. If you've ever been in any type of community where maybe the police department, the sheriff's department, and state police don't get along, there's a problem. And if there's an investigation taking place and those three agencies can't talk or share information, it's going to hinder the investigation. Same case here.
Yeah, I agree, man. I came up and I was with the city of Atlanta Police Department, and every 14 feet, it seems like there was a different police department with this jurisdiction and
Yeah.
that jurisdiction. And there was a lot of times that people just didn't talk, and I didn't understand it. And I've certainly seen that in the Bigfoot community as well. And that's why I
Yep.
say I try to build as many relationships with people as I can, like Dr. Meldrum and Matt Pruitt is a good friend of mine. Doug Hychek. You know, a lot of people discredit
Oh
Doug
yeah.
because Doug is a little bit out there in some of his theories.
I'll tell you
But
right now, Doug Hychek is a genuine individual, and I'll tell you the reason why that he really gained my respect. I love Monster Quest, of course, but and I've loved all of his other work that he's done. But I started communication with Doug to try to bring him into some of our events that we do, like Cryptidcon in Lexington, Kentucky, things like that. We talked on the phone for an hour, and he literally was just talking to me about filmmaking because I've made a couple documentaries, not Bigfoot related, but we talked filmmaking. He was giving me pointers. He was like, well, do this, do that, lock down your shots, try this shot, do this. And then he was talking to me about research and things. I mean, he didn't have to do that. I mean, why? He didn't have to do that at all. But he's an individual that wants to see somebody progress in a positive manner, and I think that means the world to so many when you can have that kind of interaction.
absolutely, he and Alex and I we connect on a try to do it on a weekly basis on some level. I've had a lot of people that he's now producing these. You know, he's doing the book thing and they're publishing these books, and I try to have as many
Oh,
of these authors on here because some of these guys have some amazing opinions on things and they've done a ton of research and all the data that we can get out there. And if my show can be a conduit for that, I want to have as many of those people on as I possibly
and the
can.
problem with a lot of that is like a lot of these people are undiscovered people. You got to think about how many Tom Shays are there out there that have never once met any kind of public recognition, but yet they have this large amount of data that could be used in a positive way somewhere. I mean, it's insane because there are people out there keeping these meticulous notes. The ones I'm most curious about are the people that supposedly have these habituation areas, like they have a farm or they're on there consistently and they're recording this stuff, they're seeing this stuff. Those people are a world of knowledge because there's so many behavioral traits they could probably tell you about that we have no knowledge of because we're there for a small amount of time.
I agree, man. So let's move into what you're doing now. I want to talk about Monster Bait TV on YouTube, of course. But let's
That's where
before
I'll go missing, by the way. So if I ever go missing, that's probably the dumbest thing I've ever done, short of climbing Mount Washington at one time was probably one of the dumbest things I've ever done too. But whatever. If you don't live, you don't have stories to tell when you're old. So whatever.
so let's get into the premise of the show. Tell everybody a little bit how you came up with this idea and what the show's about and what you're doing on the show. Let's give
Um,
everybody a little
well,
taste of that.
the idea was kind of kicked around with me and Lee and Jennifer Kirkland. We had kind of come up with this, and then I just kind of took it to be a YouTube channel because I was going out into the field so much, like weekly. And right now I'm kind of on the shelf because I injured my arm, so I'm kind of getting that figured out, and then I'll be able to go out because it's hard to go out by yourself when you're not 100%. But the whole premise for me into going out by myself is because I want to be alone. I want to be vulnerable, and I want to show whatever's there that I don't have anybody with. So I film it all myself to document it. Okay. What you will see is 100% real. None of it is fake. None of it is staged. None of it is exaggerated. I've just basically edited in a nice way where it's visibly pleasing to people. And then I put it out there. So, I mean, I try to work with different areas and I have regular areas that I go out in, but I work alone. And I work alone because it's something that I wanted to try. It's not just the danger of it, which trust me, it is really stupid. And I've been in some very hairy situations. Pardon the pun, but I have been in some very, very risky situations where when I got out of there, I was like, yeah, that was really stupid. But I think being vulnerable out in the woods and showing whatever it is, either that you're their next meal or that you're not a threat. I think that's important. So that's kind of the reason why I've done it. It's taken a little bit to get used to being out in the woods at night by yourself because a lot of these places, I will say probably 90% of them I went to so far, I have not had cell phone service. So if something happens, I'm literally stranded by myself. So I have to be my lifeline. I do tell my wife where I'm going with the GPS coordinates in case I don't come home in a reasonable amount of time. Maybe she could send search and rescue or something. But I always tell people if I do go missing, please find the camera and put the footage out there because that's the important part.
Well, Jeff, you've been out and you're doing this boots on the ground kind of research. Why is it? This is the question that's been on my brain, and I've asked just about everybody, the last 5 or 6 guests on the show. Why is it, do you think, we're in 2022 and we don't have definitive proof that these things truly exist and we don't know what they are?
Because we don't know how they work. I think that's your key. Um, honestly, I think there is some autistic behaviors that they portray in just the eyewitness accounts that I've talked to. And I'm not saying it as like a bad thing. I'm saying that they have ticks. They have common traits that they do, and I think it's just behavioral traits. Like something that I've seen, and I talked to Doug about this too. I think they use their hair as a camouflaging mechanism because you've heard a lot of accounts and you've talked to a lot of people. And a lot of times in these accounts, they talk about them swaying back and forth, and I know you've heard this several times. I think that their hair is somehow reflective or hollow almost, where it can reflect light. And I think they use that as they think it's a camouflaging mechanism. Another thing that I think that if we looked enough, I think that just like any ape, that I don't think they can keep their hands still. You know what I'm saying? So I've heard a lot of things where they're constantly doing something with their hands, whether it be rolling leaves, they're moving them around, they're pacing. I don't think they can. There's a lot of times when you hear them saying something with their hands, they're moving their hands consistently or constantly. Um, I think if we really started to pay attention to some of these little bitty behaviors, and like they always say, the devil's in the details. I think if we really start to pick apart these little behavioral traits, now we might start to learn a little more about the creature itself. I think they can lose you very easily, and I've found this to happen. There was one time that I was out in the woods by myself. It's on camera on one of the episodes. I was walking and I turned all my lights off. When I did this, there was a wood knock that was right across from me, and I didn't move. And I think what had happened was I was walking through there, they could see the light, and I think it lost me when I killed the lights because I was no longer moving. I was sitting still. They may be able to see in the dark. If they can see in the dark, they lost me because of the thickness of all the forest. So it knocked wanting to get a reaction out of me, and I didn't move. So I think then they become panicked of where did it go? Where did this person go? I've had that happen a couple of times where it's almost like they lose track of where you are. So then they try to get you to move or try to get you to react. I think if we pay attention to those little behaviors, that we're going to start to see that maybe we can trick it. Maybe we can fool it a little bit. And maybe we can use some of these behavioral traits against it to try to get better discovery or try to get better evidence.
Pretty good theories, man. I know we mentioned it earlier. You mentioned Cryptidcon. Tell everybody what Cryptidcon is and where they can find more information about it.
Crypticon is it's Bigfoot Monsters and Legends. It's a convention that me and Lee and Jennifer Kirkland put on in Lexington, Kentucky. It's coming up in November. Cryptidcon.com is where you can get all the information. This is going into our, oh man, please, they're going to strangle me. I think it's our 5th year. COVID throws me off because we couldn't have it for a year because of COVID. But I mean, it's a situation where when we designed this convention, we wanted it to be 3 experiences. We wanted it to be a experience where a fan could come and meet some folks that they see on television or authors or whatever. We wanted it to be a networking experience where researchers could come, they could network with each other and learn things. And then, of course, we wanted it to be a situation where maybe eyewitnesses would come and they would tell their stories. And we have discovered so many stories this way. But that's what it's become, and it's a very good event. It's a very social event. We had I'm almost thinking close to 5,000 last year, And we've got big guests coming this year. We haven't announced them yet. That'll be coming really soon, but it's really good stuff. But in the past, we've had like Dave Pilatus, we've had the Mountain Monsters cast, we've had the Bigfoot, the Finding Bigfoot folks. We brought Renee to her first convention last year. Um, we try to bring folks in that they can learn from. We've had Ron Moorhead, we've had Adam Davies, we've had just folks that people can listen to and may not get to see on this side of the country. So that's kind of what Cryptidcon is. So I invite everybody to join us. Cryptidcon.com gives you all the information.
Awesome, Jeff. I will link to all that in the show notes. You guys go over and check out Monster Bait TV. Give them a like, give them a subscribe, leave some comments, and certainly check out Cryptidcon. I will link to that in the show notes as well. Jeff, I've had a blast talking to you, man. I really appreciate you coming on the
Yeah,
show.
no problem. And if you ever, want me on your other show, we can talk about ghosts for however long. So, I love the weird stuff. I love the paranormal. And I highly, just one piece of advice to anyone out there doing this stuff is don't get discouraged. Don't listen to all the naysayers and experience it for yourself. You know, if you're logging, share it with somebody. That's what we want is, if you're logging a large piece of information, share it with somebody.
Very good advice, Jeff, man. I appreciate it so much.
I enjoy being on the show. I listen quite frequently, honestly. I love it. I love listening to the witnesses and things.
I definitely appreciate it. That was great, man.
Okay, cool. I've done quite a few of these, so
That always helps. Some people are like, dear, poor Tom, bless his heart. He was like a deer in
yeah.
the headlights, and
I,
it was
God,
like
I
early
love
too.
sitting and just talking to Tom, and I've done it for hours. And um, I mean, he's got so much information. I wish there was like a digital place that he could put it
Right.
because he's got just golly, just a wealth of knowledge. And his casting abilities, his ability to cast tracks is just awesome. Um, he understands things because he's worked on it so much,
Right.
and I think that's what's key is he's really started to kind of dig in there. His investigative skills are a little different. He's one of those set and watch guys. I'm one of those off the beaten path type guys. So um, but everybody has their own style and they get the results from that. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, man. I enjoyed talking to him, but like I said, it was just like I'd be like, "Yeah, you had that experience." Yeah. It was
He's very modest as
like
far as it goes.
like 45 seconds of it.
It's
I
like,
think
well,
his
what happened with this? It's like,
what
well, I've
his
seen it.
I think it was like
All
a
right.
45-minute interview. It took me about two and a
Yeah.
half hours to edit together because it
Yep.
was
I
so
totally
spaced
feel you
out.
on that one.
Oh
I've
man.
interviewed him for stuff, and you just got to dig it out of him, and it's hard sometimes. But if you're free, Crypticon, come up check it out. Let me know. You come check it out
Yeah, I'd
and
love to be a
hang
part
out.
of it, man. We're going to the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference next month as a vendor, and I think they mentioned something about possibly wanting me to speak or something next
Yeah,
year. So I'd love to come check it out for sure.
yeah, check it out for sure. We had Dave Pilatus and Ron Moorhead and the Mount Monster guys at Smoky Mountain last year. My wife actually got COVID there
Oh, really?
in Tennessee, so I was like, well, that's you got a nice souvenir. But we had those guys because we have creepy people management, so we represent so many of those guys. If you ever need a speaker or like a guest or something, look at creepytalent.com
Yeah,
and
I actually I
we can
think I
help
sent
you.
you an email with a couple of folks that
Yeah,
I'd like to have on the show.
some of them
So
are hard to pin down, and some of them don't do a whole lot. But there are some that they will do things occasionally. But for sure, whatever y'all need, I keep doing what you're doing. I like the show a lot.
yeah, I wouldn't mind taking the show up as a vendor for Cryptidcon. If you got
Oh
5,000
yeah,
people there, man, I'll have
yeah.
to.
We had about 5,000 last year. We're quickly outgrowing our space, so we're trying to figure out what's next. And it's we try to roll in everything, UFOs, and Bigfoot and things like that. We're gonna have Dave Pilatus back this year. We've got Myra. Wait, is it Maria Mayer or Myra Mayer? The Expedition Bigfoot scientist.
Oh yeah,
She'll be
I think
there.
she's in the Smokies with Russ. I reached out to
Yeah,
Russ the other day to try to get him on. I've been trying to get him on for a year. We haven't been able to get our
that's
schedules together
funny.
to show.
Ben Hanson will have him there. We try to roll in just a little bit of everything. So I'm sure we'll have Cliff and Moneymaker and stuff like that there. Moneymaker is one that's man, he's just great to talk to, but he's one of those guys that are, he comes off weird to people, but he's really just the way that he is. It's just him. But I mean, man, he has a wealth of knowledge.
Yeah, my buddy Cam had him on. I haven't even listened to the show, but Cam had him on Dixie Cryptid. I think he did a live
Yeah.
show on YouTube a couple of months back, or about a month or so ago. And I didn't see, I didn't listen to it or not. But I talked to Cam a couple of days ago. I need to go and listen to it because Moneymaker doesn't do a ton of the podcasting stuff. So
Right. Yeah, I've talked to him, um, we've talked, we've just started representing him this past year, and we brought him to, God, that was like the great white whale, like getting him.
mm-hmm.
But Cliff kind of helped us with that, and then Renee was even harder.
Really,
But we kind of opened her back up to events, and she's one that's just great, just very interesting to talk to.
yeah,
And
I'd love to
the way
have
the
her on the
show
show.
depicted her was,
I like the skeptical side of things, and I
and
love
the
to
thing
talk
is,
to
she's
stuff.
not even skeptical, but she don't believe it's a flesh and blood creature.
Really,
She thinks it's spiritual.
hmm.
And we talked about that because I had to pick her up from the airport. And I try to pick up the interesting ones. You know what I'm saying? Like
Right.
Travis Walton is always my go-to from
Oh
Fire in
my
the
God,
Sky.
I have tried everything to find
Good
someone to
luck,
contact
because
him
when we're
for
even
more money for.
communicating with him, it's hard. He lives out in the middle of nowhere. So it's very hard to get a hold of him. When we fly him in, we have to fly him to a small airport with a little plane, and then he gets on a big plane to come to us. He's hard to get a hold of. Um, but when you can get him, I mean, he's a great person, just one of the greatest person. But you can tell that something weird has happened to him.
Mhm.
It's almost like being in law enforcement, like an assault victim or something like that. You can tell that he's got something that's happened to him that was traumatic. So I mean, I've talked to him a ton. He's always nobody wants to get him from the airport. I'm like, well, they're not gonna like abduct us now. So I usually go and get him and talk to him about everything.
He's been
It's
there, done
wild.
that, and literally bought the T-shirt.
Yeah,
Right?
I'm like they're not gonna come get him again. Like I don't think there's any threat to us picking him up. But yeah, it's I've had the experience of just talking to so many people, like Pilatus and stuff like that. It's just
Yeah,
you
he
just
and I didn't hit it off so well. I reached out to him last year and tried to get him
I'll
on the
tell you,
show.
there's a trick to it. Dave is a very intimidating individual. Um, but you gotta gain his trust, and that's what we've done. He won't do many events, but he will do ours because we treat him right.
Right.
Um, we've got him to do other things. That's how we booked him into the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference because he trusted us. So I mean, he's very, very, very closed off, and you have to really gain his trust, and he has to know that he can trust you.
It was just
But
for me to, I reached out and said, "Hey, I'm a former cop. I do this Bigfoot podcast, and I'd love to have you on the show, man. I'm really interested in the 411 books, and I'd like to talk about that."
and
I didn't even say talk about Bigfoot, and
you
he
want me
came
to tell
back.
you what killed you right there
What?
was you want to talk about missing 411 on a Bigfoot show.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you the reason why is because he is so, so, so particular about not making the people. And here's the reason why: it's the families. He don't
Right.
want to offend the families and make them think that it's something else. So that's why he does. He will talk about both in his presentation, but he separates the two.
Yeah.
I mean, every check we've ever written him has been to the North American Bigfoot Research Center or whatever he calls it.
Right.
So I mean, he's a Bigfoot guy, but he don't mix the two,
Yeah.
and
He came.
that's what you got to know about him.
Yeah, he came back with, "Why the hell would I want to talk about Bigfoot?" And I'm like,
Yeah,
"Well, dude, I didn't even say talk about Bigfoot. I said talk about your books." But
he's a Bigfoot guy. He just puts up a front like he's not. But me and him have had many Bigfoot conversations.
yeah. And then I'm not gonna lie, it really pissed me off because about two
Right?
months later, we went to the Smoky Mountain Bigfoot conference, and he was there hawking his fucking books and
Yeah,
the keynote speaker, and I was like, "Oh, don't want to talk about Bigfoot, but here you are making money at a Bigfoot
yeah.
conference." So I was a
Yeah,
little
we
perturbed.
booked him into that. So yeah, but he's still even doing that. He's like, I'm so like on the fence. I don't want to offend the families. You
And
know
I
what I'm
get
saying?
that.
Like
Yeah.
he was very, very, very skeptical to do that one. But he's man, he's protective over it. He really is, and you got to respect that in some way because of the work that he does. But um, he is one of those guys. He's hard to break.
Yeah. Well, I gave up. I didn't even speak to him at the conference. I was just like, fuck it. I went and hung out with Ron Moorhead. I'd had Ron on the show and
Oh yeah,
I
Ron's
hung out with
great.
Matt Pruitt. You know, it
Yeah,
was so cool. I was going through this conference room of like 5,000 people and I hear somebody go, Brian. And I'm
yeah,
like, who the fuck knows me? It was Matt Pruitt. He recognized
yeah,
the logo on my t-shirt.
yeah. Matt's great.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
He emceed Cryptidcon for us this past year.
Yeah, he's
So I mean,
awesome,
it's
man.
I really want to warm up to him because then AWAC maybe I get to go to Area X sometime. But
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'd love.
Yeah,
But you know,
I've called Matt when I was in Georgia. I was filming a television show up there last year, and I thought we were going to get to go out in the woods, and he wasn't available. But anytime I'm in that area, I try to
it's
call him and see if we
oh
can
man,
get
that'd
together.
be. I just I got Michael Mays' book. I haven't read it yet, but I got it because I mean that's just it's so intriguing. They're doing so much good stuff down there.
Yeah, and
But
even the Olympic project, man. I've had Shane Corson on the
yeah,
show, and
yeah. We
Shane's
tried to.
awesome.
We were doing Bigfoot at the beach. It's at a casino out there in I don't know. It's like Oregon or whatever. But he was going to speak out there at the thing. We were going to get him and Mark Marcel, and then the casino screwed up and double booked themselves, so we had to cancel it this year. But hopefully next year we can get that going.
Yeah, Mark's another dude. I'm surprised he doesn't do more just on the Ape Canyon stuff. People enjoy. That's one of the
Oh
most popular
yeah,
shows I've ever recorded.
yep.
Was Mark's show on Ape Canyon,
And he is so meticulous in his research. I mean, it's crazy.
and just a really, really good dude. Just a super
Yeah, it's
awesome dude.
crazy. But
Well, look,
hey,
man,
if you're ever in the area, I'll take you out.
I
I
would
got
love it.
several areas I work with,
Dude, I
so
would love to, man.
yeah, check it out. If you want to come to Crypticon, check it out. We got vendor booths available if you want to do something like that.
Yeah,
Maybe
I'd
we can work
definitely like to
something out.
take the show up there. I don't want to do a ton. I got invited to Beachfoot. You know, Todd invited
Yeah.
me out to Beachfoot. I just couldn't go. But you know, Kentucky's close enough to make the
Oh
trek.
yeah.
So
Yeah, and it's a lot of good people out there. So I mean, we've had so many people just discover new witnesses. I mean, it's crazy. But yeah, just hit me up. You got my number and everything. So I
yeah,
mean,
man,
just let me know.
will do. I appreciate it much.
All right, take it easy.
You have a good one.
All right, bye.